the Nurses Doing GAMSAT Podcast, brought to you by Thankfully GAMSAT. We're here to teach you how to smash the GAMSAT, get into medicine, and become a flippin' great doctor. Welcome to this week's episode of Nurses Doing GAMSAT. My name's Marie. I'm one of the doctors here, one of the directors. I'm actually not a doctor at all. One of the directors at Thankfully, and I am joined today with Bella Neville, one of our study mentors and Section 2 tutors, because we are going to be talking about all about the essays. I just got my Oprah voice on. Welcome, Bella. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here.
I just want to share a little bit about you. So I know that you probably don't love me embarrassing you, but I am just so happy. You got 82 in Section 2. You are definitely a high performer in our acceleration classes because we run live classes in the lead up to the GAMSAT. And after every class, we get our students to put in like a rating for the class, and Bella is like 5 out of 5 queen here. Everyone loves your classes. And so I basically today want to get you in here to pick your brain, to ask you a ton of questions about preparing for the essay section so that anyone can at least start and really start to see improvement.
Yes.
So let's just dive straight in. I think one of the biggest myths that I hear from students is that people just go, oh, you're either good at essays or you're not.
Yeah.
So let's start there. Do you think that essay writing is actually something that people can learn?
For sure. I think that's the only redeeming factor about GAMSAT essays. You don't have to actually be a good writer. You have to be a person. And I think that's what I love to kind of emphasize when we do talk about the essay section, is it's not measuring, as I've said time and time again in my acceleration classes, it's not measuring how well you write. Again, there is some kind of criteria that you do need to have some kind of structure, but it's not saying, oh my gosh, that's such a novel idea, or that's so beautifully written, or, that's, like book worthy. It's not that at all. It's how you're able to communicate empathy and put that on a page. How are you able to show your human qualities and what you need to represent as a doctor? So they're actually wanting to kind of see, can they have a point? Can they use examples? Can they support it with really meaningful and enriched ideas and evidence that comes to something that would be empathetic, transferable, approachable, applicable to people around them? Because at the end of the day, what they're wanting to test is, can you sit in front of a patient and say, I believe this is the best course of treatment for you, this is why I think why, or this is why I believe it is. Let's talk about it. I know you might have these fears, this is how I can kind of combat that, and this is where I'm basing my opinions off. Let's kind of open up the dialogue. That's what they're wanting to really test, or at least what I believe from garnering ACE's kind of descriptions of the GAMSAT and the way they kind of approach it with students, is they're wanting to see that empathy. They're wanting to see that reasoning. And can you connect with people, even if it's just in writing? And that is the hard thing, because you're obviously not having that conversation back and forth. So at the end of the day, put on paper what you believe and what you can back up. So this doesn't mean you have to be a brilliant writer. I am not a brilliant writer. My English teachers would attest that I'm a waffler. You can tell by the way that I talk. I'm a waffler when I write. And that was my biggest thing in the essays. They were like, just less, say less, like get to the point. So it's not that I'm a foundationally very good writer. If anything, I'd be quite the contrary. It's just about being able to put a bit of you on the page, having the thoughts, having the ideas, backing it up, and being able to say what you need to say in a really empathetic, open-minded, and aware way. You want to show them that you are worldly, that you have an awareness, you're open-minded, you can look at different perspectives. So take away the need to be a good writer. At the end of the day, it's not going to matter. As long as you can have strong structure in terms of, phrasing well, writing well, in terms of basic punctuation. I'm not grammar. It's not my forte either. Spelling, not my forte. As you can, again, my students would probably be able to see in my classes. And at the end of the day, that's not the be all and end all. It's the quality of what you're trying to say. So I think that's the biggest myth that we do come across in the GAMSAT, is like, oh not a very good writer, or English is not my thing. Well, that's a good thing, because the way we write essays in school is not how we should be writing them in the GAMSAT. So definitely throw that myth out of the window. I definitely think people can learn to put themselves on a page in a way that represents them to who they are and what they need to say. Because every essay and every way someone approaches a GAMSAT essay is different. It's based on who you are as a person.
Oh, I love that, because
Yeah.
so many of my like allied health peeps are so
Yeah.
empathetic, but I think
Yes.
people get that word really wrong in terms of
Yeah.
what they think empathy is. So my understanding,
Yes.
and please, you pull me up on this if you don't agree, but my
Yeah.
understanding is empathy is basically the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes
Exactly.
and to be able to connect with them and understand their point of view, even if
Yeah.
it's not necessarily your point of view.
Exactly.
And I think that, like, this podcast is called Nurses Doing GAMSAT. We get a ton of nurses that are listening to this. And if you're not a nurse, welcome. We love you. Like, it's not just for nurses, but I think you don't become a nurse if you aren't an empathetic person. Like, that's
Yeah.
just, none of the allied health professions, you don't become a physio or an ambo or a pharmacist or someone that's dealing with people on a daily basis, which all our allied health peeps are, if you're not empathetic. So
Exactly.
what I'm hearing from you, Bella, is that maybe our nurses, our allied health friends, have a little bit of a competitive advantage here.
I totally agree. And I think, I love that definition, is being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I think that's the foundation of empathy. But at the end of the day, it's also a willingness and an openness to connect with people. Are you happy to kind of delve into that and build rapport, to listen to people? And, I feel like nurses and the backbone of our healthcare system relies on people helping people. At the end of the day, it's not, here's your medication, or here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you fluids, or you need to do these exercises. It's being able to connect with them and saying, well, what's your story? Where do we need to get you? What are your goals? And I think that's what I love about our allied health students, is the richness that they bring to my classes. Like, I've got so many nurses, I've got so many pharmacists, and they'll be like, oh, I met this patient and I spoke to them about this, and I'm not going to relate this to the theme of like farming. I'm like, farming, and you're talking about your experience, but it's so rich, and it's so you just feel like you want to go, like, you feel amazing when you hear it, and it's so uplifting and so powerful. So I think people think, oh, I'm not from a writing background, I'm a OT, or I'm a speech pathologist, and I more deal with people in a speaking capacity. Put it in. Your experience is just as valuable as any fact or as any statistic that's out there, because at the end of the day, we're wanting to see real people in medicine. And I think, as much as there are advances coming, and we're reimagining the way we deliver healthcare, at the end of the day, what we still need are people who can connect, people who can communicate, people who can feel. And I think that's a big thing, is people, like, they need to shove away their science experience when it comes to Section 2. And that's not the case at all. If anything, I say, bring it out, share it, put it on paper. Yes, there are certain ways you need to present information that remains logical, coherent, strong, but doesn't mean you can't use it. We can find ways to navigate that together. And I think if you have that experience with people, and you can feel that, that sense of, oh, this is what I believe, and that care. Exactly, Mary. And that's why I always say, when you see a theme, think of how it resonates with you. What you can write confidently on is what you're going to write the best on. Don't think about, oh, I need to write about what they think or what they want to hear. Because at the end of the day, 99% of people are going to do that, and you're going to be in the middle of, GAMSAT essays that they're reading again and again. Put a bit of you on that page. What do you believe in, and how does your experience relate to that? So I definitely think allied health professionals have a bit of an advantage. Use it. I say use it. Get in there.
You know what? It got me thinking about this experience I had the other day. So, for people that have been following along the Nurses Doing GAMSAT podcast, I'm pregnant, and that's been a journey. But if you haven't, hooray, you just know I'm pregnant and it's been a journey. So I have gestational diabetes. And so what that means is that I've got diabetes basically just for pregnancy.
Yep.
And it's this fun process where about 4 or 5 times a day, I get to pinprick my finger and test my blood sugars to make sure that my blood sugars are within range. And I'm having like all these difficulties with my fasting blood sugars, which you can't do anything about really with diet. So I'm managing my gestational diabetes solely with diet and exercise, except for fasting, because I'm not eating overnight, so I can't adjust. It's got to do with the placenta and stuff.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I'm seeing a whole bunch of different doctors about it. I've got my GP who I'm seeing regularly just about being pregnant and stuff. And then a whole bunch of these diabetes doctors who kind of check all my bloods and stuff and make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And when my fasting bloods were going up, I promise you this has a point. And this is a long backstory, but just stay with me.
Beautiful one.
But when I first started having the problems with my fasting levels, the first diabetes doctor that I spoke to was like, well, you need insulin and you need to inject insulin. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. I want to try myself.
Yeah.
And she was like, you're not going to be able to do it with anything else. It doesn't work. You know, it's got nothing really to do with your diet. It's got to do with the placenta. So you need to inject. And I was like, look, I want a week or two to just try and do it on my own.
Yeah, okay.
And then the next diabetes doctor came and she's like, well, there's nothing you can do. You have to inject. And so I'm already basically doing pinpricks on myself, which is like a little mini needle 4 or 5 times a day. And then they're telling me I've got to inject insulin into me another time. And the thought to me of injecting insulin is not fun. I don't know anyone who loves needles. And I'm already pinpricking so many times. So anyway, I go to the GP and she's like, look, we need to do something about your fasting levels. And she asked a question that none of the others had, which is like, what are you actually worried about with the injection, like with the insulin?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you want to do it? And I was like, it's another needle in my day. Like, I don't want to be, I feel like a pinprick, like cushion already. I don't want another needle. And she said to me, oh, girl, don't worry about the insulin needle. That's like the smallest one you can get. What you're doing right now with the pinpricks is actually, it hurts more than the insulin. So you might as well just do the insulin and you'll get it all under wraps. And then because you're managing your other levels so much, how about we reduce the number of pinpricks you need to do during the day, and maybe we just do it once or twice a week during the day, but then you have the insulin at night. And I was like, this is someone who has empathy, who has compassion, who took an extra 2 minutes to actually understand me and then to come up with a solution that was going to work with what I was worried about.
Wonderful. And I think that's the essence of what we want.
Yeah. This is what you mean when you say putting yourself on the page. It's like she actually cared. And not that the other doctors didn't care. It's just that they weren't showing the empathy and the compassion that I needed to get me to do the things that I needed to do. And look, real talk now, just to close the loop, the insulin is way better than the pinpricks. It's this tiny little needle. It looks big. That's the other thing. Like, I don't know anyone else there with like gestational diabetes or type 1, type 2 diabetes also need insulin. It looks like a big needle, but actually it's not as bad as the other ones. But just having that way of thinking and then being able to like solution focus, talk about it, like that's what I think is important. And when you are able to do that, because I mean we've said it once, we said it a million times, the GAMSAT's not about the GAMSAT. The GAMSAT is about who you become, what sort of doctor you become after the GAMSAT, right?
You're right.
And so to me, this essay section is like, who are you showing that you're becoming? How do we articulate that? And how do we put your empathy and your strong points? Because we've all got strong points, we've got weaknesses. Yeah. Let's just bugger off those weaknesses. Let's just showcase the strong points in the essays.
Yes.
And it's not that we need to turn the weaknesses into the strong points. We just need to have a way of like harnessing it. So
exactly.
You tell me, for someone that's kind of nervous about essay writing, what do you feel like the first step for them to take just to get better or to start?
That's a great question. And I think the first step is to just think. There's nothing wrong with just thinking. I think everyone's like, I've got to write a full essay. You don't have to. Look at the theme and think. What do you think about? What comes to your mind when you see that theme? What comes to your mind when you think about your own life in relation to that? So let's say the theme is, okay, let's go back to farming. I've been loving that one of late. Farming. What do you think of when you see farming? Do you know anyone that works on a farm? You ever been to a farm? What did you think about it? And I think everyone gets into this whole thing. I've got to turn it into a perfect essay. I've got to put it into this intro, 2 body paragraphs, conclusion. That's putting the cart before the horse. Let's focus on what you actually need, which is an idea. And I think the first thing that I encourage people is talk to people around you. The best thing to do is start building and getting into that mindset of, how do I build an idea? How do I start to care about what I write about? Because I think the first thing, when you're always thinking about what's going to be in my essay, you want this perfectly here's my perfect thesis and it's ready to go. Just start thinking, start reflecting. And I think the best thing that I did when I started studying for the GAMSAT was, I was the exact same. I used to be like, no, I've got to write a full essay and I need this perfect thesis. And you have this writer's block and you sit there staring at a page. Or like me, you end up writing 3 pages and they're like, please stop. Like my first 2 essays were over 1,000 words each. And they were like, no, you can't do that. Don't do that. I was like, oh, okay. It was pretty bad. And it comes back to, I've got no shame in admitting my first 2 essays were 28 and 28.5 out of 100. When I submitted them to the bootcamp, and it didn't stop me from getting the mark that I ended up getting. And I think that's the best thing I did, was reimagining it, how you approach the essay section. And to just get started, just start by thinking, coming up with an idea, any idea. And so, I started by talking to my family, and when they got sick of me asking them random questions, I started just talking to my pets or myself. So I used to record myself and be like, okay, farming. What do I think about farming? And then 7 minutes into it, I'd be like, farming really represents the backbone of a country that now is really underrepresented. Like, I remember when we learned about the Industrial Revolution, farming was the whole heyday before all that. It was the be all and end all. And now it's like, well, we have farms. We also have genetic engineering, and we also have other ways. We have importing, exporting. So before you know it, you will end up coming up with ideas, because you've got to take the pressure off. And I want people to kind of get into the approach of getting very comfortable with coming up with their own kind of perceptions and ways to view things, because you're not going to know what the themes are. And I wish that we did, and I wish we could have like a crystal ball and be like, okay, it's going to be something like this, or we know that it won't be politically related, or we know that it won't be really abstract. We're never going to know that. We're never going to be able to predict what it's going to be. But if you have the skill of being able to come up with ideas, of being able to go through the motions, and I used to have this internal dialogue, but like, what does society think about this? Why does society think that? Is it because of the media? What did the media do to portray that? What would my brother think about this? Because I always love using him. It's like my little devil and angel on my shoulder. It's always my brother. He just would be like, why do you think
Is he the devil or is he the angel?
He's the devil for sure. I have no shame in admitting that. And I tell him that. I'm like, you just sit on my shoulder. And I always say, like, I think like, the toddlers, and they always go, why? Channel that. Channel it in a toddler. Ask yourself why. So, at the dinner table, I used to sit there with my parents and be like, now, what does everyone think of fear? And they're like, Bella, what is wrong with you?
Not popular.
No, I was not. And then I'd be like, Mom, and she's like, yes. I'm like, I have a question. What do you think of neoliberalism? She's like, Bella, I'm not sitting the GAMSAT. You are. Okay? Stop asking me these random questions. But on the times that they were very engaged and happy to answer, we had some great conversations. And you start writing essays because you're like, that's so interesting. I really like that. Or you're like, that's completely wrong. I don't agree with that. That was really like, no. And you're going to write and you're passionate about it. Sometimes the best thing is to ask people who are going to argue with you, and you have like this mini debate. Before you know it, you've got an essay. So I think that's the first step, is don't be afraid to just think. Don't think about the essays in hindsight. Yes, we will get there, but get into the practice of coming up with ideas. Because the more passionate and the more confident you feel about something, the way easier it is to write.
So then when do they start writing?
Well, look, I think once you're confident, take the time to come up with an idea. So let's say we use one. I love using fear. I think that's a very common one that I use. And when you start putting together and you start, okay, now I'm going to think this about fear. Fear is really important. It keeps us alive. Whether it's a stick or a snake on the path, we're glad we jumped out of the way. But then also fear is one of the biggest limiting factors possible to man. We are our own worst enemies at the end of the day when it comes to fear of failure, fear of success, fear of anything. So you start to piece that together and then put it into a plan. What's the main thing you're trying to say? AKA your thesis. What's your main idea? Then what are your 2 arguments that you're going to focus on? Fear being one of the most important things that we have. But when we have too much of it, or when it's out of context, it's the limiting factor. It inhibits us. We regress. So then you kind of have, okay, I've got my 2 points, and then think of an example. So like the one on the path, is it a stick or a snake? Doesn't matter what it is, we jumped out of the way. If it's a stick, we're glad because we can keep walking. If it's a snake, we're also glad because hopefully we're getting away from it and it's not going to try and bite you again. And I think that's where I love people to start putting a plan into action, thinking through that, and then you're going to get into the writing. Once you're getting very comfortable with coming up with what I like to call mini essays, which is that plan. What's my main idea, my thesis? What am I going to talk about? What are my 2 arguments? Then put it into practice. Write it down. It is so much easier once you have an idea of what you're going to write about to start writing. So as soon as you start kind of getting those ideas, put them onto paper. So, that's what I used to do. I used to write them in a book. I used to write them on my phone. I used to have a big table in OneNote or Word, and would type them all down. And then I would put some time aside. I'm going to write this essay now. So as soon as you come up with your plan, jump into the essay. Don't wait. Don't wait until I'm going to wait until I can write really well, or I'm going to wait until I've done that grammar course. I promise you're never going to do the grammar course. I did 2 lessons and I didn't get you're not going to get that far. I'm going to wait until I know that I can write this perfectly. You're never going to write it perfectly. Just start. And I think when we do introduce new people into the GAMSAT, we always say you're going to write 2 essays to get your baseline. Let's see where you're at right now. And people are like, I'm very nervous. I don't really know how to write things. And that's so valid. I totally get what you're saying, but just write them. I promise you, you're going to get higher than me than 28, and that's already a win, okay? Beat my score. But also, let's just see where you're up to. Jump in and write it, and then from there, we can kind of find a path. But I think, as soon as you have the ideas, don't be afraid to start writing. Don't fear the writing. Get, excited about it. Be like, I'm going to prove my point. I like this. I'm going to talk about it.
So then, does that mean that people should write full essays every time they practice? What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's probably a very unpopular opinion, and I say no. I think one of the worst things you can do is just write. It's exhausting, and you become where you're drained when you even think of it. I remember when I first started my essay writing journey, as I like to say, I would just say I have to write an essay. And that's why I always every time I have to write an essay, I have to, and it's so draining. You dread it because you're just constantly exhausted with that whole process. So I actually think put time into drills as well. Yes, you should definitely be writing essays. And I like people to write regularly. Keeps up the skill and it keeps you kind of fluid in your writing. You develop what you like, your writer's voice. I feel like such an English teacher right now. Your writer's voice. But write regularly. But it doesn't mean every time you're going to tune into some Section 2 study that you're writing an essay. Instead, let's think of some drills that build the skills. Because majority of us can write essays. We had to do it in school. Had to do it in uni, probably. You probably did it within the last, hopefully, 20 years of life. Even think of it as when you're writing your response to certain things, or even when you speak to people. We have a kind of ability to string sentences together. So don't stress about the bigger picture. Let's stress about the skills in a good way. Let's really hone those skills and kind of pump the iron. So, writing those mini essays, coming up with the ideas is one of the best things I think you can do. There's no point in writing an essay on every probable topic. You're not going to reach them all, but you can probably do more plans than you can write essays. So, even coming up with that mini essay, what's my thesis? What's my BP1 and BP2? What are my examples? What's my counter argument? Some people love to get into that too. Write it down. And that's a really good drill that I love to encourage people doing. And sometimes another thing I love people to do is to just look at a quote and come up with a theme. Are you confident that you can draw the theme from the actual quote? Because a lot of people, it's a big fear. They're like, what if I can't get the theme? Well, then put it to the test. Yeah, put it to the test. I had the quote of the day app on my phone. And each day you get a little ping. I'd be like, this is your quote. Can I deduce the theme? If I can't, search it up. What does this quote mean? Ask someone. I used to ask my mum and she'd be like, Bella, what do you want, sweetie? You're like, again with the GAMSAT, but ask people, and I'd be like, what do you think this quote is about? And sometimes you just need to have that conversation. I would encourage also people to start talking, start kind of thinking, what do you think about this? Or, I have this opinion. What do you think? The amount of times my brothers would be like, you're so stupid. Why do you think that? But it starts a conversation. You get past the insults and you actually get into a very deep and meaningful conversation. Ask people that are probably not going to say that. Like my peers, I ended up having a little study group in the boot camp when I was in there with a couple of other boot campers, and we would have these amazing conversations about it would start with a random off the topic thing, and then we were like, we could write an essay on this, and before we know it, we had a full plan. And sometimes even putting in a podcast. You know, what I used to do, and I used to take the dogs for a walk when I just felt like I needed to move. But yeah, I'm like that guilt of not being proactive, like I'm not studying. Put in a podcast, go for a walk, come home, write down 2 things you learned from that podcast and how you can use them to support an essay. It doesn't matter if you're never going to write on that topic. You're getting very used to using the world around you, what you learn, what you see, what you hear, and turning that into evidence. Because at the end of the day, you need that flexibility. So sometimes, you know, re-engineering the way you approach your Section 2 study to be building the skills, to be building your internal confidence is sometimes more valuable than just sitting and writing essays. That said, every plan you write, put it into a table so you can get back to it and then write that essay. So, you know, when I was about a month and a half out from the actual exam, I was writing every day. Every day I set my 30-minute clock and I wrote an essay. Before that, though, I'd be writing 2 to 3 times a week. Sometimes I write 2 essays together. Sometimes I just write 1. But I got into the practice of getting very used to writing, but it wasn't my everyday. It wasn't my every single time I sat down and said, I'm going to study for Section 2. You know, it was just setting the intention of, I'm going to be building that skill. What skill do I need to work on? A lot of people say, I either have too many ideas or I have none. I stare at the theme and I can't think of anything. All right, well, let's get used to what do we do in those moments? What questions can you ask yourself? Where's your little toddler on your shoulder? What are they asking you? What are they thinking of? And sometimes it's even being willing to have that conversation with yourself. And I used to record myself and I hated listening back to it because I would hear my voice and I'm like, I don't, but you didn't, yeah, you're going to have to suck it up and then do it, because sometimes you hear what you said and you're like, oh no, okay, I could keep that going. Or now that I've had some time to reflect on it, or, you know, I got off the train and walked home, by the time I've gotten home, I'm like, oh, actually, what did I say? Oh, I can think of something else. Or, you know, you might even be at the shops doing some shopping and you're like, have an experience, you're like, I could turn this into an essay. And my students will know this from my classes, and I complain about it every single season. And that's when I went to the shops. My brother's quite fussy and he doesn't eat a lot of fruit. But, you know, like we need fruit in our lives. We need veg. And one of the things he absolutely loves was grapes. Loves grapes. And I went to buy grapes and it was like $17 for one little bag. And I was like, $17 for grapes? That is horrible. So I had my whinge. But then I ended up using that in an economies of scale essay where we talked about how when we don't, you know, when the cost of living increases, yet it's not matched with what we earn, what we have, what is disposable, it takes away our autonomy. We don't have choice. I want to buy my brother's grapes, but that's a big price to pay for some grapes. At the end of the day, I ended up getting the grapes because it's a different argument, you know. But it turned into an essay idea. It turned into something bigger than what I thought it was in the moment. And something I also love encouraging is daily reflection. At the end of the day, you know, before you tuck your phone into bed, as we you know like to say, that little nighttime routine, I used to write down 2 things that I learned. Something that like was quite structural, quite logical. So it might be like, oh, I heard on the radio today that the unemployment rate has decreased. Why do we think that is? Oh, you know, maybe it's because more jobs are being created, or is it that is more accessibility to jobs? Skills are becoming more transferable, or is it the other way? Is it like more like needs are being filled in different areas, or is it kind of a stigma where there isn't that being reflected in what we're seeing in the day-to-day life? And then something more personal. So sometimes it would even be reflecting on a conversation I had or something I felt, and then kind of drawing that out and reflecting, what did I learn from that? So, you know, we've all kind of had that moment of like, damn, I made a mistake, or damn it, that was embarrassing. Turn it into a piece of evidence. I remember, you know, getting into a lift and someone was like, hi, how are you? Not really like they had AirPods in. So I was responding to everything they were asking the person they were talking to on the phone. It was so embarrassing. So they were like, hi, how are you? I was like, oh, I'm good, thank you. How are you? And they were like, what did you get up to?
Like, honestly, that is like the most relatable thing. And then you're like, oh my God, they were on the phone that whole time.
But the really sad thing was it was a long conversation. I was visiting my dad. I was on level 57. And I was going all the way to the B1. So it was a long time. And they kept talking. And I thought they were talking to me because they had their hair covered. So I was like, this is such a nice person. I'm like, what did you get up to today? And they're like, oh, you know, Jimmy. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, they were. And it's not until she was like, I'm so sorry, I'm not speaking. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, it was only on like level 7 when she told me. So I'd done 50 floors of the elevator stopping and letting people in. I was horrified. Absolutely mortified. So, you know, my cheeks were flushed. I was horrified. But it became a really good dinner time conversation. It cheered up my brother who was having a crap day. And it turned into a really good piece of evidence. It was an anecdote that I actually ended up starting an essay with. and it's something I hate reliving because I think of that moment and I think of just the shame. And I think the other people in the lift noticed and they were looking at me like, she's got AirPods in, she's not talking to you. And I just thought she was the nicest person. It was great. And I was having a ball. Like I thought like, those people who are just really like chatty Kathy, and they're like really relatable and you just make you laugh. I thought she was one of those. No, she wasn't, by the way.
Not at all.
Didn't turn out that way, but it turned into, what do you learn from that? Sometimes you got to be able to laugh at yourself. It turned into, I saw the essay theme of humor and I was like, sometimes, you got to be, my first instinct was to crawl into a ball and just die a million deaths. But I ended up sharing with my brothers, and that laughing, it takes the pain away because you can have a laugh, move on. Do I think about it all the time? Yes. Do I regret doing it? 100,000,000% I regret doing it. But reflecting on that day to day, it can turn into anything. And I think that's what is a big stigma around. They're like, you need to know facts, you need to know statistics, you need to know your history. I don't know much about history. I've forgotten everything I learned in year 10, But anything can be evidence. It's how you use it, how you break it down, how you analyze it. Can you reflect on that? What would you want someone to learn from your experience? Which is check if people are wearing AirPods or not. But
FYI, I'm just saying.
You can show me that you're.
You know what I quite like doing?
Yeah.
I like listening. I actually make myself, but I feel like a virtuous person when I do this, which is finding something that is contrary to what I believe and then actually like actively searching out for like a podcast or something on it so that I can kind of understand. And every time I've done this, I have found that I just empathize with the other side, if that makes sense. So like part of it is like American politics, for example. So, not a big Trump fan. If you're a big Trump fan, good for you, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I really respect women's rights. I think that's an important thing. But what I did was I went on the Joe Rogan podcast and I listened to him talking to Elon Musk. And Elon Musk was like pro-Trump at the time.
Yes.
And I realized that all of the social media that I had consumed around Trump, which was like very non-Republican, let's say, the people that were on that algorithm that were like pro-Trump and pro-Republican and pro-MAGA were saying the same things but opposite. And so they're getting indoctrinated in one way. And I, who am anti-Trump, am getting indoctrinated in another way. But like, it was almost like the same story, but flipped.
Yeah.
And it made me realize, like, I didn't understand how someone could vote for someone like that.
Yeah.
And then I realized, it's because they're not actually voting for the same person that I'm seeing. They're seeing a whole different person. And so it actually provided this empathy that I didn't have before and a totally different point of view on American politics than I ever had. And I wouldn't have done that if I didn't listen to that podcast and actually challenge my own way of thinking.
Yeah.
Now, am I pro-Trump now? Absolutely not. Still respect, women's rights and basic human rights. But at the same time, I just have a understanding and I feel for people.
Yeah.
And I think when you were talking about talking to people and getting an opinion, it's really important to have your opinions.
Yes.
But it's also really important to expand yourself. And it's not changing yourself. It's not changing your opinions. It's actually making you more informed and it's going to give you more ideas. So like now if someone like something like women's rights came up as a theme, I'm going to have infinitely more to talk about because opening up this other opinion that I didn't know that I had.
Exactly right. And I think that's what you need at the end of the day. As I said, we're not going to know what theme is going to come up. Gosh, I wish I could. But if you have that skills, that transferability, that, that flexibility to go, what do I believe? What do others believe? What's that middle ground? That's going to get you way further than you trying to spend all this time imagining what the theme is and trying to come up with quotes or evidence or or examples, trying to memorize statistics. If you can memorize them, go for it, please. Anything you can provide is gold, but there's nothing wrong with,
Can't.
yeah, I can't.
Like,
Yeah,
I don't remember every single thing that I
no,
breathed ever. Like, who does?
no. There are some great people out there, and I applaud you, but
Yeah,
majority of us
it's not
aren't
me.
going to. No, it was not me. And I think a lot of people think, oh, if I can't remember that, then I'm not going to do well. Not at all. Show that you are human. Show that you care. Show that you've been open to having conversations that are a little bit prickly at times, or you have to kind of swallow a pill and go, well, maybe I'm not entirely right, or maybe there is another side to this. Because there are many times I kind of steamrolled into a conversation with my eldest brother, who's like the quiet, man of very few words, and I'd be like, this is what I believe in this, and he'd be like, but what about this? And I'd take you back, and you're like,
Damn it.
ah. And my other brother's like jumping up and down, the little devil. I'm like, shush, this was really insightful. Enough with you now. I'm listening to this one, and so that will come out on paper. That will come out. And I think a lot of people always fear, well, what if I don't know what to talk about? Then why don't you know it? Ask yourself the questions. You've got to know something. You're going to recognize something in the 5 quotes that you're presented. Something's going to hit you. Be open to anything. It doesn't mean if you can read 4 quotes and be like, got no idea. But on the 5th one, okay, I kind of see what they're saying, or that made me think of this. Follow it. You don't need to agree with every single quote. You could even disagree with every single quote. But why do you disagree? Why would someone disagree with you on that? And it's being able to have that conversation and open it up, and that's what develops really deep and meaningful essays. Because again, I'll come back to one of my weaknesses was I was really superficial. I would be like, war is bad, and it's horrendous, and it's atrocious, and I would do 1,000 words on that. And they were like, you're not building depth, there's no arguability. And it's when I came round to I think I wrote that war one in April, and then I came back in like July, like August, kind of right before, and I wrote that war is complex, and it's like a double-edged sword. It's good and bad. Good because it shows us the pure human evil in the world, and we learn from our mistakes. War serves as a lesson in our history, and also we got penicillin and some other great inventions from it. It's actually a really good time to build innovation. It pushed us to our absolute worst, so we had to become our absolute best. But then it's also really bad because think of what it has done. But again, it serves as this reminder. So my thesis was that, we need to change how we view war. It served as a lesson. So that's way deeper than saying war's atrocious and it should never happen. But it has happened. So what can we learn from it? So you see, those are very 2 different perspectives. While it echoes very similar sentiments, one's a lot deeper and a lot more considered than the other. And, that's what I think the best essays I read are the people that are willing to kind of put in their own flair, put in their own opinion. It's not saying you just want to be ranting and raving, saying, this is what I believe, and this is yada yada. But why do you believe it? Back it up with what your reasoning is, and reasoning comes back to the GAMSAT in every form. Every section has reasoning. And a lot of people say, oh, I was reading this for section 1, and then it made me think of a section 2 idea. Well, there's the reasoning. You're doing it right. And then even offering counter arguments, but then backing up why you still believe it. There's nothing wrong with saying, while other people say this, or while other people see the view of fear as this, or see farming as this, I still believe this and why. So you're able to acknowledge it very thoughtfully, and at the end of the day, you're showing that you care. You care that you're willing to have your own opinion, but you also realize that other people have different ones too. And at the end of the day, that's all we really want in your essays, is that empathy, that passion. And a lot of people, I even encourage, use your own experiences of what you're working towards. One of the best essays I believe I ever wrote, and it was not one I did in the GAMSAT, it was on motivation. And I was like, well, I started with like, I don't want to study today. I don't want to write this essay, but this is why I'm doing it. And it talked about my journey. I talked about the GAMSAT and sitting, and it sounds so wishy-washy now, but when you put it onto paper and you kind of come to your own terms and you reflect on that, what would you want someone to learn from your experience? What have you learned from it? And it even ended with saying, it's going to make me a better doctor, because on those days where you're dog-tired, on those days when you've had a hard case, you walk into the next one with the same amount of passion you treated the first one. The same amount, you go back to your roots. And so sometimes it's even taking a step back and reflecting on your own experience as well. That can be just as valuable as any statistic. And I think that's something that I love talking about, is what can we use as evidence? What can you use it as an idea? Because anything can be an idea. Anything can be evidence.
You know
Just
what?
how
I
you
want to go back one step when
Yeah.
you were talking about war. And I think
Yes.
that there's something that you breezed over that I wanted to share, because I don't know
Of
if
course.
it was obvious, but
Yeah.
I was like, we've got to highlight this because
Yeah.
it's something that we do with all of our students, and it's like the big thing that moves the needle forward.
Yeah.
And you said, oh, I wrote that essay in April.
Yeah.
And then you rewrote it again in
Yeah.
July.
I
And
did.
this is so important, because what a lot of students think need to happen is that I'm going to write an essay and either I'm going to mark it, or maybe you put it through ChatGPT, which real talk is not that helpful, let's face it, but everyone will go through their own journey discovering that. Or like best case scenario, you get it marked and then you get this feedback that comes back, but you don't learn from the feedback. You actually learn from the implementation of the feedback. And
Exactly.
what that looks like in real talk is writing the essay, getting the feedback, and then rewriting that same essay with using the strategies that you have received within the feedback.
Exactly
So
right.
if anyone is listening today, and in fact, maybe I can give them some more nuggets by asking you this question, Bella,
Yeah.
because you've worked with so many students.
Yes.
What do you think separates the students who improve to the ones that stay stuck?
I think it's exactly that right. And it's applying what you're learning, not just being like, oh yes, thank you, that's great feedback, but putting it into action. And it's the students that, you know, they might send me an essay and we go through it on a power call and they rewrite it and send it to me again. And it's like, you've taken that next step, because so many people are like, thank you so much for that feedback. And I'm guilty of it. There were times I didn't rewrite essays that I got feedback on, but it's the ones that I did rewrite on that made them so much richer and so much better. And, you know, I even had these conversations with students and they're like, you know what, I've got to take this back to square one. You know, in this conversation, I've realized that I went down a bit of a rabbit hole and it's not lining up and I can't save it by fixing my thesis. Let me start again. And sometimes, yeah, it's awful. You're like, oh, I've got to write the whole thing again. But write on what you're passionate about. And that's what I think separates what my maths teacher loved to say, the weeds from the flowers. You know, if you're just writing an essay, submitting for feedback, and then you hear the feedback, that's great. But you want the lesson that you can take to the next theme. You're not going to get that feedback. Sorry, you're not going to get that theme again. But what did you learn from it when you rewrote it? And sometimes it is starting from square one. Sometimes it is saying, I went down a rabbit hole and I need to learn how to tailor my thesis to actually fit the arguments that I'm using. Or the other way around. Am I having arguments that have nothing to do with the thesis I have? You know, and I think that is the main thing for people who are willing to do that, but also people who are willing to try hard things. So many people are happy to write essays on things they know. War, happiness, love. Few people are happy to write essays on things they don't know. Nanny state, boycotting, neoliberalism. I did not want to write that one.
Meritocracy.
Exactly, meritocracy.
I once had a student who was like, I don't even know what it means, and I got it as my theme in the essay. Like, goddamn.
It's gonna happen. That's a
You
change.
gotta prepare for that.
Yeah, and it's not to be like, come on, please don't happen. My big wish, you know, is that doesn't happen. You have no control over that. I hope you get a great theme. I wish everyone gets the theme that they love writing on, but we don't know if it's going to happen or not. And it's not wasting time stressing about it. It's equipping yourself with the skills to be able to do something. And then again, you're given 5 quotes. You're going to be able to put something together from the 5 quotes. And if you're used to looking at a quote of the day, coming up with a theme, I promise you, by the time you get with the adrenaline rush, something will come to you if you're open to it and you're willing to take it on. There's nothing worse than seeing a theme and be like, don't know what that means. There's no point writing. I'm just going to sit here and I've done it. I've done that before. It's being like, okay, I don't know what it means, but what do I think it's related to? You can normally garner that. And then kind of going down that rabbit hole. Politics. I've got no idea about politics. I have tried. It just doesn't seem to stick in there. I think it's because I'm not interested in it. But that was what my essay was about. Why I'm not interested in politics. Didn't really learn it in school. I think I went to Parliament House in year 6. Don't think I spoke about politics at school after that. And then also, when I look at the media, what do I see about politicians? Oh, this scandal, that scandal. You're like, I have no trust in you if you're going to be doing that. You know, so then you build in, maybe that's why I don't know a lot, why I don't really want to learn a lot. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think what would separate the best students from those that might just get mid-range, from those that can push into the next level, are those that are willing to push everything, try everything, turn over every stone. You know, and when we apply feedback, it's not to degrade you, it's not to criticize you. It's about pushing you to your absolute best. So take it on board, write it again. Even there are essays that I've written, that war essay, I even write it again now. I challenge myself as someone who's not even sitting the boot camp, so the GAMSAT, to write it again. What would I change? Where did I kind of skimp on before? Was it a really weak example? Did I have, a bit of a cop-out thesis? And I challenge myself to keep writing. And I think the more and more you throw yourself into this process and let yourself do so unapologetically, the more you enjoy it. I got to a point where I started writing essays. When I started, I hated it. Couldn't stand it. It was draining. It was like that. I'll go and wash the car rather than write the essay. Or my brother's like,
again.
Yeah, I don't like washing cars. It was something that, or my brother would be like, can you take me? I'll be like, yes. Don't need to be going. I'll take you.
Just like,
is it across town? Okay. And I started to enjoy it. I had these conversations, and even with I had friends that even now as a tutor rather than a sitter, I still have conversations with my friends when I get these topics that I'm like, this is the ones I'm presenting to my students at this week's class. What do you think? And I've written an essay on it because I'm like, oh, I like it. This was fun. So, also become passionate about it. Make it fun. Read about things you like reading about. That's where we bring in, one of the drills that we recommend is bringing in your passions. If you like reading about feminism, if you like reading about philosophy, if you like reading about psychology, read about it. Then put it into practice. What would you turn this into an essay idea about? What could you use this as, evidence for? There are so many times that I listen to like a podcast. Like I love the Mel Robbins podcast. She has amazing guests on that. And one of them was this amazing cognitive specialist. And she talked about all these amazing kind of trends and tropes. And it kind of broke down very common human experiences, such as like when we say, I don't like something, but you've never tried it. It's because of an experience of what you associate to it. You almost imagine it's going to be horrible before you've even tried it. And it's just how powerful the brain is. And you end up using that in essays that you never imagined you could. I think I ended up using that in an essay about, what was it about? I think it was it favoritism? I think it was something like that. It wasn't even directly related to choice, but I ended up using it anyway. I think it was favoritism or something like that. Some kind of nepotism, something along those lines. And I was like, how am I going how am I going to make this work? You end up finding a way because you throw yourself into it, and you're just about giving yourself the time to grow. No essay is perfect. Even the essays I write now, probably not perfect. Probably not going to, measure up to what people are putting the standard at. But there is no exact standard. It's about putting you on the page. They're not going to mark the essays and be like, well, you didn't use this language or you didn't have this idea. It's not how they're doing it. They're marking on the quality of what you've been able to come up with. Not the quality of how well you string together sentences, but the quality of the idea and the evidence you use to support it.
So I want to do a few rapid fire questions and just maybe 30 seconds or a minute each. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you sure you're ready?
I'm a waffler, so I'm probably never ready.
From one waffler to the next waffler, we both are, so it's fine. I actually really appreciate it.
Yeah.
My husband is a get to the point kind of person, and now I'm with you. I want to hear I want to hear the backstory, the front story, the middle story, and not in the right order.
No.
So, what point do you think students should start practicing under timed conditions?
That's a great question. I think I'd rather you build the skills in the lead up. Don't put the time pressure on straight away. I would say a good time to start bringing it in is about a month and a half to 2 months out. Even pushing it to a month before if you're getting confident with your skill building. But let's say, okay, we're getting kind of close now. We're at July. But let's say, when I started in April, I wanted to be writing to time then. And and one of the best things I was told was, then you're not building a skill, you're writing under pressure. And, so don't be afraid to take the time pressure off. Take the time you need to write the essays, but keep track of it. Okay, this essay took me 1 hour and 2 minutes. Okay, well, we need to be at 30, but we're at 1 hour and 2 now. The next essay took me 57 minutes. Okay, what did I change in that to get faster? So I think right now, focus on building the skills. And as we get closer to the exam, let's set the benchmark at 6 weeks before. We want to get used to what does 30 minutes feel like. So that's what I used to do. Put 30 minutes on the clock. At the start, I was not finishing those essays, but I got very used to what 30 minutes felt like. And then you kind of measure up to that time. And it was, for me, writing less and not writing more. But I think, definitely about a month and a half to a month before we want to start writing to at least putting a timer on. and kind of feeling what that pressure feels like.
So you often recommend writing like one timed essay each day before the exam.
Yep.
From probably that 6-week mark or month mark.
At least a month.
Why do you think that's important?
Because we learn through repetition and consistency. You want to know what 30 minutes feels like. 30 minutes is 30 minutes. Whether it's a hard theme or an easy theme, time doesn't change. You want to be very confident that, okay, I have 30 minutes. How much can I get on the page? Sometimes I would finish an essay. Sometimes I wouldn't. But as I got closer, I started to be able to tailor, okay, I've got this time. This is what I'm going to do. If it was a harder theme, sometimes it was writing less, but changing the way I approached it. So, on those easier themes, I dove into the detail. I had greater emphasis on my anecdotes. On the kind of those harder ones, it was like, okay, I'm going to really streamline this. Sometimes I had a 3-sentence conclusion, but I still got it on the page. And I think also it's also getting very confident with building your technique. Everyone's technique to how they approach an essay will be different. The only way to test it is to actually do it. How do you find your technique? You put it into practice. You sit down and you write an essay. And I think, again, there's nothing worse than being like, it takes me 2 hours to write an essay and my essay, like, I've got to write in a week. You're not going to be able to change much in a week. You can change a lot in 6 weeks. And a lot of people think, but what if I'm not finishing the essays? But how much are you getting on the page? What can we talk about? Can we change the way you plan your essays? Can we change the way you approach the theme? Can we change the way you're thinking? Can we change the way you write in a certain way? Can we toss up the structure? There are lots of things we can do in that time. And I think in a sense, you're actually buying yourself time. Yes, it's still going to be 6 weeks, then 5 weeks, and 4 weeks, but you can do a lot more in that time by planning ahead and going, but I want to be at this goal and I want to get to this point. There's a lot we can do, which is fantastic.
So then after you finish writing an essay, what's the best way to actually review it?
Walk away, have a break, get out of that kind of stressy, come off the adrenaline rush. So I used to give myself, like a good 30-minute break, maybe. I used to go see my dogs, have a drink of water, have a cup of tea. Yeah.
They
Oh my
really
gosh. They never told me to go away when I was like, neoliberalism. What does it mean to you, Coco?
You have dogs. My cat would tell me to go away.
I have 3 cats. I never spoke to them because they were they literally deliberately get up and walk away from me. But my dogs are like, I'm listening. I always felt like I have my best interests at heart. They're listening to me. I've got full attention. I know.
I tell all the students to bring their pets to the acceleration classes. And then I don't know if you were on this class. I think it was last year, so you probably weren't there. Someone brought their baby chicks to class.
Oh, that's so cute.
I know. We spent like a minute all going, what? You have chickens?
Hello.
Little one. I mean, it's all on Zoom, so it's not like they were bringing them in on the train or anything.
No.
But I say to everybody, particularly on the mindset ones, because we talk a lot about some very vulnerable things happening in people's lives. It's just nice. If you're feeling vulnerable, but you're like patting your cat, you feel better.
Oh, insurmountably so. And I think, one of the essay topics that was about 10 years ago was loving your pets. Write the essay. I wrote that essay 100 times over. I love that essay. And I would always start it with Coco Bear or, Ruby or, I have a little, I have a little farm, My cats don't appreciate me and my, I have 5 dogs, 3 cats.
She's lying down next to me right now and has slept this entire podcast.
See, that's support. My cats would have peeved off. They would have walked out and been like, again with the essays, go, but it's one of those things, again, writing on your experience and writing on what you love and in sharing with them. So I'd get up and walk away, give Coco a hug, pat Ruby, all that kind of fun stuff, and then have a drink of water, kind of clear the mind, then come back, sit with it again. And, one of the things I love about the bootcamp is the resources we have. And we have a resource for going through and kind of breaking down all the main points that you need in an essay. But sometimes even reading it again and going, what was my structure like? Can I see the clear structure holistically? Intro, BPs, or body paragraphs, conclusion. Then what about if I zoom in? Did I have a topic sentence? Did I have an example? Did I back it up with that analysis? Was this a really good example? Or was this a flimsy one because I was running out of time? And I think even just asking yourself those questions are great. And don't be afraid to send it to a friend. you're going to be your own worst enemy. I find you're more critical than what, to yourself than what you'll ever be to anyone else.
Honestly, I totally say don't send it to a friend because they don't know what the hell they're marking on. They don't have any criteria.
Exactly.
You need someone that knows what they're talking about. That's my strong opinion on
Of
that.
course.
And of course,
Yeah.
open for you to debate it if you like. But honestly, like, unless they know GAMSAT essays, like for example, I speak to students at a different stage than you. I'm often speaking to students before they've joined the bootcamp. And what happens often is people are like, oh, I'm still in touch with my English teacher, so I'm sending my essays to her. But I'm like, your English teacher for Year 12 English is not giving the same feedback as someone who's marking a GAMSAT essay. They're just not.
No, they're not. And that's the great thing about the bootcamp is the network we have. And it's very selective who you send it to. So when I would send it to a friend that's not a GAMSAT friend, I would say, don't tell me what's wrong with it. Does it make sense? Does the idea clear? Did I explain it well? So when they'll be like, your structure's off, your thesis is, I'm like, no. Leave me alone. Or they'd be like, that's not how I would write it. I'd be like, get off your high horse. I'm not asking that question.
Tell them to
So, like, when I give it to my mom and she's like, your punctuation is poor. That is a run-on. I'm like, Mom. But I'm like, Mom, did it make sense? And she's like, look, I see what you were saying, but you trailed off here. But when I read it, I was like, well, it made sense in my mind because I believe that. But she was like, but I can't see that this doesn't link. So then I'd be like, okay, I need to go back and strengthen my linking sentences. So that was a really great point, Marie. Thank you. When you do send to people who are not familiar with the GAMSAT, don't ask for feedback. Ask, does it make sense? Does it flow? And, could you read it? Did it come across as logical? There's nothing worse when you've written something in a haze, and you will. You'll have your essays which you've written in like smash, and sometimes I would even do like spot, like halfway through my study, I'd be like, I'm going to write a timed essay, and it would be horrible because I'd be like, didn't finish, run on sentences.
You were procrastinating physics, weren't you?
I was. The car was already washed. It was raining outside, and I was like, I can write let me do it timed. I've just started, but let me do it timed. And, just giving it to someone who's not a GAMSAT person, for them to say, this doesn't link up. Your thesis, you said you're going to talk about this, but then you started talking about that. And I'm like, didn't see that. Don't listen to all their feedback about how you should write and how you should do this, or that's not very professional. Well, this isn't professional. This is people, But then giving it to people in the boot camp. So I had my little, I had my little study group. Yeah, I had my little group. I had my little people I could send it to. I had the, the essay Slack channel. So if you are in the bootcamp, use the resources. You have the marking team for the essay prompts. You have power calls with Section 2 tutors like myself. You have the essay Slack channel. I'm on there. So is everyone else. We love reading other people's and reading our own. It's really fun, So use the resources, but always try and seek to get better. It's not that you're not doing well. It's not that this is a crap essay. It's like, well, this is strong, but how can I make it better? How can I make it stronger? How can I make it deeper? How can I make it less deep? Because now I'm just writing 1,000 words again. It's just about how can I be more concise? Or there's always something you can do.
If students only remembered one thing about essay preparation from today, what would you want that to be?
Focus on the skills, not the final product. We don't know what the essays are going to be on, but if you know that you have the skills to come up with ideas, to link together ideas through strong evidence and using your own experience, using the world around you, and to put that into a strong structure, you practice writing in a really good way, or you have this skill of being able to, I piece my things together. I have a thesis that's conditional, or I have topic sentences that are like this, then that's what you need to focus on. You could write 1,000 essays, but if you don't have the skills to back them up, then it's not going to get you very far.
Oh, I love that. Focus on skills.
The skills.
Bella, it has been an absolute delight having you. I could talk to you about essays for like 15 years. We are definitely going to get you back on. I'm not inviting you. I'm like insisting. Anyone in like podcast land right now listening, please insist with me so that we can get Bella back on, because I want to pick your brains more. Thank you so much for sharing so openly and just being the amazing person that you are. So we appreciate you. And for everybody listening, enjoy the rest of your day. Like us, follow us on all the socials, and obviously subscribe to the podcast because that helps us get out to more people. And just have an amazing day. Keep writing. Bye for now. Hey, I have a cool gift for you, just for listening to the Nurses Doing GAMSAT podcast. We do some of our best work in our Facebook group called, you guessed it, Nurses Doing GAMSAT. It's free to join, and every day we're sharing actionable guides, tips and tricks, and really just how to smash the exam and get into medicine. You can join today by searching Nurses Doing GAMSAT on Facebook. Thanks for listening to another episode, and I'll see you next time.